Hey guys, we're live. Everybody over there in the chat room. Hey Wendy.
Hey.
We're going to start the show in just a couple of minutes. We start right at 4 o'clock. Hey Wendy.
Hey.
Hold on. We're going to start the show in. That's my YouTube that was on, and it was picking up feedback from that. So there we are. I think we're ready to roll. We got what about 2 minutes, a little more than 2 minutes, and we go live.
Live, baby, live.
All right, you hear my mic okay? There we go. All right.
Yeah.
It's sound test. Testes, 1, 2. Testes, 3, 4. Working.
Hello, Philip. Hello, Uncle Dave. Hello, Elder Barry.
Philip, good to see you. Uncle Dave, good to see you. Elderberry, good to see you. And Field Guy.
Sounds okay from here, says Uncle Dave.
All right. Well, good. Then we're pretty much set.
Hello from the UK. Hi, Ian. Hi, Julie.
Ian and Julie. Ian and Julie, or Ian and Julie? I don't know if it's Ian or Ian.
I think it's Ian. Ian and
I met Julie on the Exodus Reality Adventures, our trip to Egypt back in 2014 when everybody came along.
And there's Keith. Hi, Keith. Yeah.
And where do you guys live, Ian and Julie? Where do you guys live in? They're from the UK, so they live over there. Hey, Keith. We're going to blast off in about a minute, a little less than a minute.
No
so what
pressure.
we're going to do is, like with Intrepid Radio, we'll go dark at about 15 seconds before we start. Then we'll launch the stream and do the opening credits. So we've got a half a minute, Wendy.
No pressure, Scotty.
No pressure.
No meltdown. We're cool.
That's right. That's right. All right. Getting close.
Yeah, they're from Cumbria, Ian and Julie.
Okay,
so they're
Cumbria.
A bit further up the country than me.
We're going to go dark. So I'm going to take you out of the screen. I'm going to take myself out. Folks, we'll be back in a few seconds. Wendy, we're going to go without our opening sequence. For some reason, that dropped off of my program, and I'm not sure why. Went to click on it, and it would take 5 minutes to get it uploaded again. So, hey, folks, welcome to Roberts and Robertson.
Hello.
Just a small technical glitch that held us up for a few seconds. Our show opener is gone. We could sing it for you, but
I'll play it, love.
Yes. And I am going to do one thing I neglected to do. Because of this software, I have to plug in my headset. So pardon me for this, folks. I got to turn this around.
Hi, Matthews. Good
so I can reach the back side of my computer.
Hi, Project.
And there we go. Just when you think you're all set and ready to roll, there's always something.
Always something.
So no opening sequence. So onward and forward. And so thanks, everybody, for joining us. This is our second episode. Still working out a couple of kinks, as you know. And, we had the opening sequence last week, and it's just not here this week. It's just not there.
I know.
So I'm not quite sure where that went. So we'll work on that for next time. And in the meantime, let's just get rolling. I appreciate everybody that's come into the chat room. And I am over here in North Central United States, for those of you tuning in out of the country, over in Great Britain, and and Wendy's coming to us from north of London,
south of
London. I do that every time too. Mental blocks.
Yeah.
So I wanted us to come on today and talk a little paranormal stuff.
Yes.
And but a little mixing of paranormal with history, because the best kind of hauntings, the best kind of paranormal investigation you can conduct is one that gives you a little bit of history about a place, and that a place that means something, and that there's things that go on there. And so before we do, though, Wendy, I want to once again familiarize some people with what you do, who you are, what you're all about. I can start by saying, and this is only the second episode, and so we still have new members tuning in, new viewers tuning in, listeners over on the radio station. And so, which is, by the way, that is subspace.radio. If you want to hear this show in its audio format only, go on over there. That's just a radio station. And then we simulcast in video over primarily on my YouTube channel, and that's youtube.com/Scotty Roberts. And that's Scotty with a Y, not an I-E. So Scotty Roberts, and you can go over there. We'll get Wendy's linked up as well. We're still trying to link up all the different locations where you can catch this show live. So if you want to join the conversation, there's a great chat room that's started over on the YouTube page, youtube.com/Scotty Roberts. And Wendy, we've known each other for the better part of 2 decades.
We have.
Probably about 18 years if you got really specific with it.
Yep.
And so we've been good friends for a long time. I know a lot about Wendy. She knows a lot about me. If you're friends of Wendy's and you listen, I probably know some of the stuff you know. And if you're friends of mine, she knows some of the stuff you know. And so that it was what we thought was a great start for something we've been talking about for a few years. And that is, let's kick off our own little radio show. And so now is as good a time as any. And you're now joining us for episode 2. And by the way, this episode, unlike last week, which was pre-recorded, that's why we had the opening sequence. It was added into the edit of the pre-record. And I never did upload it here. So there, the foible was mine. Human error. Disintegrate, destroy. So that's why we decided to do this. And it's 1 hour a week. And so we're going to talk about the stuff we like. And now I'm doing all the talking. I want to turn it over to Wendy and have Wendy start doing all the talking. We're going to tell us just a little bit about your background, what you bring to the table, how long you've been doing your paranormal investigating, and your linkage to the whole paranormal world, the spiritual world, and then we'll blast off from there.
Well, I mean, just briefly, I mean, I when I was 7, I discovered that I had clairvoyant abilities, and it was a bit of a shock at the system to be so young and have it. And it wasn't something that came to me easily, nor did I want it. So I actually got it shut down, which you can do. You can close it down. And then I didn't want to reopen or go down that road until I was probably in my late teens, early 20s, which I then went ahead and did. And I was a clairaudient before, which meant I heard spirit. And now I'm a clairsentient, which means I sense, I feel. And literally, I sat in a psychic development circle. I learned the tarot. I honed my gift, as we said in that interview that you and I did. And it's I love anything alternative. I love everything to do with the paranormal. I have a lot of friends that do all lots of paranormal investigation, like Mark with the spiral that he does. I have never actually worked with Mark as yet to do with the paranormal. I've done some paranormal stuff on my own in investigation with others, but not with Mark yet. But it's just something that he and I would like to remedy for sure. But I've always been a massive history buff. Loved it. So, and being drawn to certain places. And so when you go there, you tap into the energy, you tap into the the feel of the place, and that's why I want we touched on this briefly on Sunday, and I thought it'd be a great one to go back with tonight because so many people I think will be interested in it.
Yeah, and frankly, you live in the heart of history.
I do.
Where you are right now, at least in the Western world. Well, now there's
Yeah.
history all over the place.
Yeah, I do.
But you compare British history to this history of the United States.
Yeah.
And yeah, we've got ancient history, but it's before, the Western world's time here.
Yeah.
And we go as ancient as about 400 years with our own history.
Well, I think
And
Britain is, as you say, is the mother country in some ways. Of some ways, it's very old energy, and we go so far back, and we're very good. We don't actually get rid of any of our historical sites. We keep them and celebrate them, and people pay lots of money sometimes to go and see them, which is. But near me is, I mean, there's a lot of beautiful places near me, but there's one place that's quite close to my heart. And that's the one I thought we'd talk about tonight.
And tell us a little bit, when you name this, tell us why it's so close, Jarrett. What is it that draws you there? And what is this place, by the way? I know what it is, but tell everybody what we're going to be talking about.
So I don't live far from it. It is probably well known to be with certain monarchs of this country. And it has quite a macabre history in lots of ways. And for me, it's always been my personal favorite. It's always been the place that I go to, and I feel like something special links me there. I feel like I just want to go there. I feel like I've come home in a way. And that is, of course, Hampton Court Palace, which is probably known to be one of the most active palaces in the United Kingdom. She is over 500 years old. And according to Google, she's actually worth 57.6 million on the market.
Oh, well, maybe if I win the lottery over here, which is, it was $1.9 billion to win the lottery. And you get they take about 40% off the top of that, and the rest you get cash out. The Powerball over here, that's been going on for years and years and years. Now nobody won it again last night, so it's going up again. So if I win that, I'll buy Hampton Court for you.
You've got to get me a ticket. So I have to use my glasses sometimes because I've written so much down. But actually, Hampton is from two Saxon words. So ham meaning bend in the stream, and ton as in settlement. So Hampton is very Saxon. So this is actually old ground that Hampton Court actually sits on. And as I say, it's over 500 years old. Now, everybody knows about Henry VIII. Everybody knows about the 6 wives that he had, and they all know about. But there's lots of other things about this palace, which makes it quite a paranormal dream to go because of so many things that have happened there. And it's not just Henry VIII's time as well. And obviously, when you start going to Hampton Court Palace, you're also bringing in the Tower of London and, Kew Palace and Kensington and Whitehall and Nonsuch and lots of other palaces as well. But I mean, basically, Cardinal Wolsey, which was one of Henry's, he was Henry's right-hand man. He was a bit of a naughty boy because he was Henry's right-hand man, but literally he was cardinal, so very, very high up in the Catholic faith, would wear the long red robe. He had a mistress and he had 2 children. And Henry was, when Henry came to the throne, he was young. He was in his late teens and he was 6'2". He was beautiful. And basically he wanted to go off and do his own thing and play and everything. He gave everything to Cardinal Wolsey to do, everything. So this guy basically was the main man. You wanted anything done, you went to him. And he was so integrated in Henry's court that he actually put Henry and Catherine of Aragon's emblems into his palace at Hampton Court, the pomegranate and the Tudor rose. That's how much he was involved and believed that marriage would last forever. Unfortunately, as we all know, that didn't last. And actually, between Anne Boleyn and Catherine of Aragon, there was almost like 10 miscarriages. Can you believe that? That's terrible. But This palace obviously was Cardinal Wolsey's when he couldn't get the divorce from Catherine of Aragon, from the Emperor and of Spain and the Pope. Henry said, well, not being funny, you can't do it. I'm just going to make myself the head of the Church of England and you're no good to me anymore. And so to try and buy his way out of that, he offered the palace to Henry, and Henry said, yes, thank you very much. I'll take that.
Nice.
And by now, obviously, he'd met Anne Boleyn, and she was, the woman that he wanted to marry. So Cardinal Wolsey got carted off, but before he actually died by execution, he died. Some say natural causes, but we don't know. Now this palace is in Henry's hands, and very sadly, it goes through Anne Boleyn, it goes through Jane Seymour, it goes through Anne of Cleves, it goes through Catherine Howard and Catherine Parr. They're the 6 wives. And there was some, it was known to be the most beautiful palace. He believed in showing nothing but how much money he had by the drapes.
Sure.
It was gorgeous. But sadly, it knew a lot of unhappiness, because obviously Catherine of Aragon had been there. She was gone. Anne Boleyn, obviously, beheaded, killed. Jane Seymour died. Anne of Cleves was divorced. Catherine Howard was beheaded, and Catherine Parr survived him only really just. So just looking at that history just on its own before we go to the other ones, this is a place where there's been a lot of energy. And with a lot of energy, emotional energy, that the walls, they kind of, those energy seeps in. It stays in there. A lot of pain,
Sure.
a lot of quite a lot in there.
Was Wolsey? I know his official response had to be, "I'm giving this to the king," but was he all that happy about that? My understanding, in reading some history and maybe seeing some fictionalized versions of this, I think it was, I don't remember who the actor was that played Henry VIII in this. Was it possibly Richard Burton? When he played Henry VIII to James,
very good.
Not Mason.
Anne of 1,000 Days, yes.
Yeah. And it showed Wolsey as being very depressed, very sad about giving up his home.
It was because he was Henry's right man, and Henry had gone to him about everything and trusted him. It was like nothing went through the palace unless it went through Cardinal Wolsey. And so he was used to the king saying, whatever, just do whatever you like. Everyone's,
Right.
He would hold the council meetings, and all of a sudden he failed. And it wasn't his fault. It wasn't the fact that he couldn't get it. It was the fact that the Catherine of Aragon's nephew was Emperor of Spain and was also involved with the Catholic Church. So the Pope was not, the Pope's hands were tied. He couldn't do anything. So no one was going to get this divorce. So in the end, Henry VIII went, well, fine, I'll just make myself head of the King of England. And that's what, head of the Church of England as well. So Wolsey did become very, he gave the palace to say, look, this is my pride and joy. I mean, this palace was worth a fortune. When he actually built it, it was for 200,000 crowns, which would have been in 1514. That is a hell of a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
So, and you're talking about this palace, that you would go to this palace, you would have 20 courses of food when the king was there. He would bring 800 staff of the court wherever he went, and you would be expected to pay for that. So Wolsey, if he turned up at Wolsey's at Hampton Court Palace, he would have to pay for that. So,
and that would be that's when the king went on progress. I know Queen Elizabeth, his daughter, was in later years. When she came to the throne, she used to go on progress around the country, and they'd go visiting, and they'd have the nobles or their favorites that would put them up when they came visiting. It wasn't like, hey, honey, prep the spare room. We have the king and queen coming. No, it was the king and the queen and about 300 or 400 people with them. And so that was quite the entertainment bill that would
People
be
always talk
foisted
about
upon that house.
Catherine of Aragon being the wife that he didn't love. He absolutely loved Catherine of Aragon. They were 17 years. It was a love match. If she had had a son, we'd be having a completely different conversation. He loved that woman, but in his mind, his father had said to him, because of the how they got the throne in the beginning, how the Tudors got the throne, you've got to have a son, you've got to have an heir.
Right.
She was too old. I mean, between, as I say, between Anne Boleyn and Catherine of Aragon, 7 miscarriages and 10 pregnancies. I mean, that is a hell of a lot. And from a woman's point of view, to keep losing stillborns, miscarriages, that is quite a lot. So it would take its toll. In the meantime, you know, Henry was also a really important fact about Mary Boleyn, who was Anne Boleyn's sister. She was actually Henry VIII's mistress before Anne Boleyn was. And he had a habit of doing that, you know, because Catherine had been married to his brother, Arthur, and he had died. So he'd married his brother's widow. And then he'd had an affair with his next wife's sister. All very sleazy.
Who was it that Henry wrote, alas, my love, you do me wrong? He wrote that to who?
I think the song is Greensleeves. I think it might be around the time of Anne Boleyn, for sure. I mean, I would say she is probably out of all of his wives, she is the woman that he loved, and he tore apart a kingdom. He didn't just tear apart a kingdom, he tore apart his life, his marriage, his friends, because if his friends didn't agree to the marriage and they wouldn't accept, you know, his daughter Elizabeth as the next heir, he beheaded them. He sent them to the scaffold. So this was a massive thing. And also it was damnation of his soul, because he'd been a Catholic, very high Catholic prince, and all of a sudden it was like, you're excommunicated now. So you can see why this is so big. So everybody thinks about the 6 wives when we talk about Hampton Court Palace. And if we just look at that very briefly about the paranormal side of these wives before we go on to the others.
Yeah.
Obviously, he went on to marry James Seymour once he sadly beheaded Anne Boleyn. Within 11 to 13 days, pretty quick, he married James Seymour.
Let's get on with it.
That's like, bring the next one in. Next.
Yes.
And
stiff upper lip and all.
She was very different to Anne Boleyn in character. She had to be, because if your husband's previous wife had been beheaded, you would be different. She gave him the son. Sadly, in labor, they weren't always taken care of. You know, if they ripped themselves during labor, infection would begin in. And she actually died of childbirth labor. So she died, and then he married sometime later Anne of Cleves. Didn't like her, divorced her, but she was probably the wisest out of all the wives. She became the king's sister and inherited a hell of a lot of money and power. And then we moved to Catherine Howard. Now, Catherine Howard is pretty sad, because this is a woman who is literally 15 to 17. Oh, Scotty's disappeared. He was there 1 minute.
Oh, I'm here. I just focused in on you since you're talking.
She was between 15 to 17 years of age when he got with her, and he was 41. And by now he's carrying quite a bit of weight, because what's actually happened is, while Anne Boleyn was pregnant with the son, he had a jousting accident, which basically she ended having a miscarriage, and he changed his temperament. The Henry, who was lovely, turned into this nightmare sadist, you know, the stuff of you'd never want to be around. And so you had to be careful with Henry. He would change just like this. So Jane obviously kept her mouth together. And when she sadly died, and I'm abbreviating this to obviously get through quite a lot, but when she died, he was kind of gutted. And then he obviously went to Anne of Cleves, and then he married Catherine Howard, young girl, came from a very good family, the Howards, very high up. She'd been used to sleep with this one or that one to further. Sure. And it was quite sad. Anyway, she married him. I mean, that's, you know, you could smell his leg 3 rooms away. That's
you hear about things like this in history too. And I don't care, noble families or not. I could never bring myself to say, you must sleep with this noble or this man in order to tighten our political bond to them. You have to have not much love for your child to be able to whore your kid out.
It was all
That
about power. I mean, women were used for power. That's
Sure,
what they were used
sure.
for, because you would marry them to bring in like a good union. So Catherine Howard was from, I think it was the Norfolk branch. She was related to Anne Boleyn. And so, you know, it was like the Howards were beautiful women. So he married her and he adored her. He called her his Rose. And it was like, here I am at 41, I've got my vigor back and I've got this young girl. Obviously, she being very young, couldn't handle a lot of things. She liked being queen, but I don't think she enjoyed anything else that came with it. And she met someone yet again, and she took a lover, Thomas Culpeper. And sadly, that affair came out, and the king was in the chapel, found a note, read the note, and broke down in tears, broke his heart over it, because he absolutely loved her. Now, when she was arrested and she was kept in her room, she managed to break free, and she ran down the gallery and knocked on the chapel door, begging to be let in. And he ignored it, completely ignored her. And she was distraught. And in fact, when one of the priests came to see her for her confession, he actually said, she's so distraught, I actually don't think I can, I don't think I could do this. But she was such a brave girl. As I said the other day, she asked for the block to be brought to her room to practice how to lay her head for when it was chopped. Now, Anne Boleyn was cut by a French swordsman, because she was an anointed queen. Catherine of Howard was given the axe. So it's very, very different.
Wasn't there something, a little historical anecdote that somebody had to snap their fingers for Anne Boleyn so she would look away? That's or look toward who snapped their fingers, and then they did the sword.
Yes, she was praying, and you would be looking around like this for the swordsman, and he actually had hidden the sword, and he asked for her to be distracted, and someone waved, or he waved, something was waved in front of her, and as she turned, he went down the side, and he was very good at what he did. And so she was gone but as he lifted her head up, she was still speaking the prayer.
Yeah, the brain still worked for a few moments.
Exactly. Yeah. When you die, when the soul goes, when the brain stops, or when the heart goes.
Yeah. Did Henry, this is a difficult question to ask because he had her beheaded, but did Henry love her?
With Anne Boleyn?
Yeah.
I think love is very akin to hate. You can love someone so much and for whatever reason turn against them. And it happens in every day in every country around the world. You're in love with someone, and the person you love just turns against you.
When he got the news that she was messing around, that was the news. I think, has history proven that was even true? Or have we been, my understanding, we've been going all along, that was trumped up against her.
You mean Anne Boleyn or Catherine?
Fabricated. Anne Boleyn.
With Anne Boleyn, it was fabricated. Everything was fabricated. She adored him. She was not going to have an affair, and she was very flirty with a lot of people at court. She was very strong, opinionated. She was not afraid to stand up to the king and say, no, that's not the way it is. And I think sometimes that went against her. Her family, the Boleyns, had enemies. The Seymours were coming up behind her. It was like she failed to give him a son. Henry's eye was starting to look elsewhere, because it's like, look, I've just split the Church of England. I've just made myself, a king of pretty much the whole of everything, and
and the head of the Anglican Church.
Exactly, and you've not given me a son as you promised. So his head was turned. So she knew her time. But I think she was offered at one point to go away with Elizabeth and go quietly. She was never going to do that, because she would never disinherit her child. So it was always where Catherine Howard didn't have that opportunity, because obviously nobody really stuck up for her. And obviously the last wife Catherine Parr survived him, but she almost nearly ended up getting her into trouble because she actually I can't remember the name of the book, but she actually wrote a book, and it was all very Protestant, and a woman writing a book back then, the church hated it. So she almost got into trouble, but she managed to use her womanly wiles and get round the king. So there are 6 women just using that. So on a paranormal version, just using that time in history, James Seymour's spectre, ghost, people believe it's James Seymour. There is a certain stairway in the Hampton Court Palace, and at a certain time of the year, her spectre or a spectre and they think it's her, is seen walking down the stairs with a taper, which would be candle now, but a taper coming out, going into the courtyard and heading towards where her son's room would have been. So she's seen that. People have seen that. Which is quite sad because obviously she died very, very soon after he was born.
Right.
Catherine Howard's ghost has been, and the thing about the Haunted Gallery, it's a very beautiful gallery. And obviously there's a lot of energy residue left there as well from that time. But people have heard her screams. They have felt coldness. A couple of people have fainted in that particular area where she's run down, and also they felt like coldness, being touched by her. So these 2 wives, is it a time slip? Are we seeing that? Are we hearing that? Or is it actually, is it actually their ghosts? And also, I'll add into that, if you think about it, their deaths were very gruesome.
Yeah. And their lives were very tragic, even though you're the queen of a country.
Yeah.
Especially, I would think that any young woman after a certain point in Henry's reign and the number of wives that were gone would, please don't say the king is in love with me and wants to marry me.
You wouldn't want to. Well, apparently when he was looking for a new wife after James Seymour, a very high up lady was asked, would she be interested in marrying him? She said, if I had 2 heads, I would. But as I've only got one, no, thank you. And quite frankly, I think I'd have been the same. So when Anna Cleese married him, very clever woman, said, absolutely, let's get divorced. Here's your ring back, smash it to oblivion, and let's get the show on the road. I'm quite happy to be your sister. And she became a very powerful woman.
This is Anne of Cleves?
Anne of Cleves, yeah. And
there was, you mentioned the book by Catherine Parr that she wrote. It was called The Lamentation of a Sinner.
That's the one. And
it was a 3-part sequence of reflections that she had published. And she was the widow, the one woman that could claim to be the widow of Henry VIII.
Yeah.
And the first woman in England to ever publish under her own name.
She's very lucky she survived because, he would have had no crime. The fact that he was old, because he was only 50 in his 50s when he died.
Yes.
But Catherine Howard is someone that I've started to research quite a lot more about, because this is a girl that actually had said that she'd been raped, used and abused from a young child. Like in her house, strange men her grandmother had allowed strange men to come into her home, into her bedroom, to have carnal relations with her. This is a young girl that had been used and abused for men's own, whatever you want to call it, pleasure. And so no wonder the girl was troubled. Now, one of the other famous ghosts at Hampton Court Palace is a lady called Sybil Penn. And she was a foster mum to Prince Edward. That was King Henry's son. And she took care of him and Elizabeth. And when Elizabeth got smallpox, She nursed her, and then just to say thank you for it, she caught smallpox and died.
Oh my.
And she died around 1542, and she was quite well cherished. Actually, she had quite a lavish funeral, and she was recognised for who she was. So she was laid to rest, and then sometime later, and we're going now to 1800s, there was a really bad storm in the UK, and the church where she was struck by lightning, and her tomb was pretty much destroyed.
Wow.
Within literally a short time after, things started to happen at Hampton Court.
It was a sign from God.
It was like
a portent.
And basically people heard an old woman muttering. They heard a spinning wheel going, and they would see this sort of like apparition of the Grey Lady. So it went on for quite a while, and people were like saying, this is, I'm not happy about this. And eventually a room that the noise was coming from that was actually behind a wall. They took the wall down and they found an old spinning wheel in there.
Oh my.
No one could have got into it. No one could have got into it in that time and done a bit of spinning. It had been bricked up, but they'd heard it, and that's why they took it down. And she's still seen at Hampton Court Palace on the wheel and also walking around, and she's quite tall, and she's called the Grey Lady. So isn't that amazing? That's
amazing history.
She's not royalty, but she's still haunting. She's still on the grounds.
I think couldn't you get, I think a lot of people that investigate these castles from a paranormal aspect, they don't just pick up the royals, and it's probably more rare that they pick up the royals and any nobility. They pick up an awful lot of servants, though, people that served in the palace.
I mean, they found in 1871 2 male skeletons underneath in shallow graves under the cloister in the Fountain Court, and it's so beautiful, because when you go into Hampton Court Palace, you've got the big gates, you go in, you've got the great hall, and then you go into sort of like a courtyard, and they have this sort of fountain, and it's around there is called the Fountain Court. And they'd found these 2 male skeletons and an elderly lady, because if you worked for the royal families, they would give you what they called grace and favor apartments. You would be allowed to stay there for a while. So she'd complained about hearing banging and scratching and knocking on walls, and she'd complained about it. And in the end, when they were doing some work on the court, they dug up these shallow graves with these 2 bodies, and they think they were soldiers from the Cavalier and Roundhead days.
Wow.
And they were taken out and buried properly with full honours, and it just all stopped, just like that. Everything stopped. And also
all the activity altogether
of that particular area. That woman had heard the banging and knocking, just stopped. And then on top of that, there's a dog that has been seen, a big dog, lying by the fire, which isn't on. And there is a ghost that follows you around, and you can smell it. You can smell the lavender and orange perfume or whatever it is they wore in that days. They can smell it. So these are just other paranormal that's just sort of like linked to that. But because the palace went on to have other monarchs there, which is quite interesting, because it then comes into some of America's history, because after Henry, it went to it sat there after Henry sort of finished it and Elizabeth had gone. It kind of sat there empty for a little while. Yes, it was a palace. Yes, it was used for certain things. A Roundhead and a Cavalier, you were either a supporter of the king or you were a supporter of the government in Oliver Cromwell's time. So I believe that the Cavalier was the king. I think that's right.
Yes.
And the Roundhead was Oliver Cromwell, because he wanted England to be.
And Oliver Cromwell was responsible for the execution of the first execution of a king of England.
Of Charles I.
He was Cromwell. I guess you would call him a parliamentarian.
Yeah.
The government he wanted was run by the parliament, not by the monarchy.
Yeah.
And Charles I.
So I mean,
And,
he was a Stuart. So after
yeah.
the Tudors came the Stuarts, and so
Oh, here we go from Dave. I'm sorry. The
Cavaliers
Cavaliers were the Royalists. The
Royalists,
Roundheads were the Parliamentarians.
knows.
Yep.
But William and Mary took this. They actually took it on Hampton Court, and they wanted to tear all of it down, and they wanted to make it like the Renaissance palaces in Paris. But money wasn't always there, so they started at the back and they made it into this beautiful Renaissance palace. But the front still looks like Cardinal Wolsey's, and it's still like that today because they ran out of money. And when William and Mary passed, it then went to George II and Catherine, who actually kind of loved one another. They were George Stuart, and but they hated their son, believe it or not. There's a very interesting story about George II and Catherine. They were very much into each other. They lived at Hampton Court very happily. They used to have locks on right by the bed so they could lock the door so that no one could come in. They wanted lots of canoodling time with each other.
Canoodling time?
Canoodling time,
Got
darling.
it. Got it. The technical term. Yes.
But over the years, you know, George's eyes wandered. Catherine put lots of weight on. She ate lots of chocolate. She was quite unhappy. They hated their son, George III, who we'll come to. And then their other son was called Frederick. Now, his wife, it's a very funny story. His wife was pregnant. He hated his parents. He did not want his child born under their parents' roof. So the day that his wife went into labor, can you imagine this? She's in labor. Oh. He dragged her out. She had to walk down all the stairs. He was stuffing handkerchiefs up her dress and wiping everything down so no one could see that she, you know, her waters had broke, and she was, you know, going down the stairs, and took her in a carriage, poor woman, and she gave birth elsewhere. Can you believe that?
Those carriages didn't have the best shock absorber systems either.
Especially over the cobbled, no.
And so now this is George II's wife?
This is George. This is George II and Catherine. One of their sons was called George III.
Was George II the king who was the madness of King George?
No, that's going on. That's going on from there, I believe.
Because George III was the king during the American Revolution.
He's the one who lost us some. I was going to say he's the one
who flipped out a little bit, huh?
He's the one who lost us America.
And lost so he's America,
not forgiven for that, is he? Because that's, you know, he gave up, and his father was fuming. You know, they all were fuming because he was not seen to be a very good. They were not happy about him being the next king because they all knew that he didn't really have, in their opinion, what it took. So Hampton Court had really those sort of monarchs, and then after they passed away, it kind of was then not rented out, but it was, you could go and visit it. You could stay there. You could, you know, it was used as like a tourist tent, really.
Sure. Now, when you have gone to Hampton Court, what have been your experiences there? Being a clairsentient, you will feel the spirits. What have you felt anything there other than a general feel? Have you felt anyone there in particular that you say, hey, I know that this is this person? Your personal experience.
There's a couple of things, and also I haven't forgotten the most famous recent one, which we'll come back to. But when you go there, Cardinal Wolsey's closet for me was Canudo was C-A-N.
C-A-N. I thought it was a K.
His closet to me was really oppressive. I felt when I went in there that I couldn't breathe, that I felt very sick, very nauseous, and I just felt like I was being smothered.
Yeah.
And I had to leave. And apparently that was quite common. I've also had the privilege of walking down the Haunted Gallery at nighttime on my own in the dark, which is wonderful. And you actually think to yourself, you can smell, you know, how old it is, but also you go past a lot of rooms where your eyes are trying to adjust to the dark, and you think, did I just see something?
Right.
To me, it's like the kitchen, for instance, the Hampton Court kitchen. you know, they had someone doing that spit pretty much 24 hours of the day, right?
Right.
You go in a room like that, you go in the cellar, you go into, you know, the chocolate room or the bathroom or whatever. You walk around these different rooms, you're picking up the energy. They've actually got a toilet there that one of the kings actually used, and it's, imagine the smell of that. It's, although I've cleaned it up quite a bit, you are going to pick up energy of them because they have things there that were there and residue energy. But at the same time, your mind does play tricks with you, of course, especially if you're going in the dark and you're thinking, am I seeing something? You know, it's good to keep that very skeptical. Could it be something? Could it be not? But yes, I have picked up quite a few things when I was there. I have felt it, especially when I did the ghost tour, Scotty. That was amazing.
Yeah.
You'd
Now,
enjoy it.
you say they are not open to having investigators come in, so you've never had the opportunity to just go through as an official ghost hunt. But when you walk, say you go with a friend or by yourself and you just go over there, do you go to
Well, the
collect
palace is
your own
open.
personal data?
Yeah, the palace is open, but they used to do ghost tours. They're not doing it at the moment at night. You used to be able to could stay at the palace certain times of the year. I'm not sure if they're doing that right now because obviously COVID has changed some things.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as it's a palace, I'm not sure how they feel about paranormal investigators. I'm not sure if they've had a lot of people ask if they can do it. Whether they've had some in, I'm not aware of.
I think what we should do, you and I have talked very loosely about the possibility of my coming over there, we doing some investigations together, get Mark in on it, and I would like to find out what it would be to get official permission.
Wouldn't it be great?
You know, that would be fantastic. We'll have to see how
I did
that
ask.
pans
I mean,
out.
when I did the ghost tour, I did actually say to him, "Is it possible to do a paranormal investigation?" But because it belongs to the crown, I'm not quite sure whether or not it's allowed or not. The interesting thing is that you can go and see it at night time. At the moment, if you come to London, they're doing they're lighting it up for Christmas and they're doing all kinds of things. And they did a very much a Halloween special as well there, which has just passed. They bring the ice rink out at the winter time, so you can go and really appreciate it. The thing about the paranormal and the palace, they go hand in hand. You can't have Hampton Court Palace without thinking of Henry VIII. But what about the other monarchs like William and Mary and George and Catherine that were there as well? These were, you're walking around a home where people lived, they loved, they cried, they lost babies, you know, there was passionate affairs. There is so much energy. People died there, they were killed there, you know. You're picking up that energy when you walk through, and some of it's incredibly sad.
I'm sure it is, and for somebody who is clairsentient, you're going to pick all that up, even if you can't identify exactly who that person is. You're feeling that. I know I've walked into places. I don't claim to be clairsentient. I've got a smidge of empath going on that gives me it because I am moved by emotion when I feel things, and it's not like, oh, I'm scared. Oh, scared of this and that. It's not that. It's sometimes I'll walk into a place and I can feel the emotion of that room, either happiness or deep sadness, grieving, and I've felt that kind of thing before. So I've got to imagine those are the kinds of things that you can pick up while you're there.
And of course, the one thing that I've left till last, because everybody talks about it, is the last time that Hampton Court had a ghost. Well, the most famous one, probably, Skeletor, which happened in October 2003, which is when
I still have that
CCTV
video.
captured a figure flinging open a fire door. And it did this on 3 consecutive days. And on the second day, the figure appeared. So on the first day, the doors just sprung open. There was nobody there. The cameras picked up nothing. Second day was a figure. Third day, nothing. But 3 days, and then it stopped. But it is a very spooky picture to look at because
I actually have a video file that I downloaded of that. And it, of course, is now not sitting in the folder where I put it. So I'm going to call it up here.
I mean, when you see
bring it into that,
it looks very much like it's wearing some form of shroud or hood and costume. And we were talking about this the other day. Is it male? Is it female? It feels male to me when I see this.
Here you go, folks. This is the footage that was caught in 2003. They had the hell debunked out of this thing and couldn't prove that it was anybody pulling a hoax. But this was picked up by the CCTV cameras at Hampton Court in one of the back fire doors. Here we go. Whoops, I got to add it. There we go. Now play it. Watch these doors. They flew open, and that figure came out and shut the doors. They're going to show a little closer view of this. I'm going to freeze it right there for a second. That's the figure they saw. Yep. They said there was nobody there in costume the day that this happened.
Yep.
And at the time of day that this happened. And they started trying to examine what you're seeing here. And you see the face, and there is what looks like a big coat that is being worn. I don't know what kind of fabric, but it looks like it's fur-lined. It's parted at the waist and open to the feet. And then a line of the fur, it looks like, going up, a fur or a trim of some kind, going up to the neck, and maybe a fur trim around the neck and a fur trim around the cuffs and the sleeves. And so this is something that was seen. Let's continue to play it here.
But you can see when those doors open, you know, and I have seen where those doors are, and it's quite a small area, actually.
Yeah. I'm going to play that again, just so we can see it again. Okay,
but
watch this again.
Again. 3 consecutive days in October 2003, those doors came open on their own.
And did a hand reach across and shut the door we're seeing on the right?
It looks like
it popped back open after this door came shut.
Yeah.
Is that an arm going across the top? I couldn't tell.
So the skeptics would actually say it could have been anyone, right? And
right, it could have been anyone.
I never know, but it's quite something to have seen there. A little few facts here about Hampton Court. Pirates of the Caribbean 5 was filmed there, and you can actually see Captain Jack Sparrow on the quite famous staircase run down there. And also Anne Boleyn and her sister Mary Boleyn. Would you believe it that our queen, our late queen, and our late queen mother are all related from Mary Boleyn? Yeah. And also William and Harry are related from, on the Spencer side, from Henry Carey, who was Mary Boleyn's son. So what is quite amazing about Anne Boleyn and her background is that even in today's monarchy, she's her descendants through her sister are still there.
Wow. Wendy, I'm going to open this up to wow is, by the way, one of those radio responses I hate when I hear them. It doesn't mean I'm brushing that off or I'm dismissing what you're saying. It just means that was a quick way for me to respond. Wow, that's crazy stuff. And so I'm going to invite 1 or 2 callers to come in. You've got to be very brief because we've only got about 7 minutes left, something like that. If you've got a question you want to ask Wendy, go ahead and I've pasted that link into the chat room. And hi, I'm in backstage as Truth Finder. Truth Finder, you have to tell us a little bit more about you. You haven't been here the whole show, so I'm not going to just bring you in. We've had this kind of thing go on before. That I've become very skeptical of this.
Yeah, you've got to be careful because there's so much spam around, isn't there?
Right. I call people in without knowing who they are or hearing anything about them. We've had porn pop up on the screen. So not saying you're doing that, but that's That's what we have to do
I mean,
here. If you're in
absolutely,
the chat room already and
Harry
have
has
been there
got
and have
royal
contributed to the chat room, I'd be willing to take your call. So anybody else over in the chat room? Paul from Newcastle. How you doing, Paul? We're just almost done with the show. And I want to say hey to everybody else that's come in the meantime. I didn't want to interrupt the show. Truth Finder, if you're legit, that's cool. Send me an email. Send me some information or go ahead and subscribe to the channel. And let's get to know you a little bit.
So Rapid Dog has just said Harry's got no royal blood. He actually does have royal blood because Princess Diana is actually quite more royal than actually the present royal family is. And her lineage is Henry Carey, which was Mary Boleyn's son, which was Elizabeth I. So Elizabeth I, yes, they're all descendant from them. So they do have royal blood. Harry has got royal blood.
Right. Matthew, you've got a lot of information you put into the chat room. I'm not going to bring you in. We just needed a couple of brief questions. Sorry about that, brother. So I appreciate all the information you put into the chat room today. However,
well, just an interesting thing about the toilet. David's just written. Just think of the hygiene of a velveted cushion toilet seat. How lovely that would be to keep clean. If you took care of the king, you would be called the groom of the stall. And you would want to be the groom of the stall because you would have the king all to yourself and you're handing him like really nice material to wipe his bum with.
There you go.
So, yes, you would want to be next door to him while he was on the toilet.
They did not have bathroom tissue back then.
No, they didn't. No, they not.
It was bathroom sponges and cloth and things like that. So Rabid Dogs is not the right royal blood.
Depends
so there's Dave reaching out to Truth Finder. Let's find out a little bit about who you are. Thank you, Dave. Anybody else have a question they want to throw at Wendy? Otherwise, we've got about 4 minutes left of the show, a little under 4 minutes. So we can start wrapping it up. We'd start playing some out music for you and do our outgo, but we don't have that handy today.
Can't do that today. I think that everyone should go and watch Pirates of the Caribbean #5 and actually see Hampton Court Palace, or at least
there it is.
And there's lots of, and also there's many different films about Henry VIII. and of 1,000 Days is a very good film to watch. Not exactly true, all of it, but Richard Burton as Henry VIII. You can't go wrong with Richard Burton as Henry VIII. And who was the one?
Lots of good films about Henry VIII.
The Tudors, that was on.
I was going to ask what you thought about the Tudors. Those kinds of series tend to be a little bit too fictional and fanciful, and everybody's really good looking.
Is that Jonathan Rhys Davies as the king, wasn't it?
Jonathan Rhys something. Jonathan Rhys Davies was Sulla in the Indiana Jones movies.
He made a very good Henry, even though you could hear his Irish accent coming through.
He did make a good Henry.
I actually think they did really well with the Anne Boleyn whole episodes. I think they did really well. Yes. I think they rushed it. They rushed it as it went on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he got Henry's rage pretty well down to it. He wasn't as big as Henry, but I actually thought the ending with Hans Holbein when he did that massive portrait of Henry, because the bigger the portrait, the more menacing it was. You can go to Hampton Court Palace and see that painting. It is phenomenal.
I would love to see that painting live.
Yeah,
and see what that looks like. I haven't done a lot now. In the last couple of minutes here, I'll tell you, I haven't done a lot of paranormal investigation work in England, but I have been places there, and I did capture a ghost, I think, on camera. Now, it's in the highly dubious orb form, and it was at Porchester Castle, way down south, and Porchester Harbor. And at this castle, I got a large orb in one of the knocked out windows of the castle wall, where all you saw was black sky behind it. And when I blew that way up, that orb, we got the face of, and I'll show it sometime, the face of what looked like a monk in profile, with his mouth slightly open. You could see the ringlet of hair cut out and a big cowl collar that was encapsulated in the orb itself. And it wasn't just periodelia. And what was very interesting about that was we found out the next day, because we had gone back to the hotel room and I blew it all up. I downloaded all the pictures to see if we captured anything. The very next day, we learned that there was a monk that has been purportedly haunting the castle ruins for like 800 or 900 years. So we may have caught something, and I'll show that next time you and I are together next Tuesday. I'll maybe bring that picture up and we'll show that and we'll talk about that a little bit. Right now, we got about a half a minute left, folks, and we got to get out of here. So remember, every Tuesday, 4 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Eastern, and of course, 10 p.m. over in Great Britain. And so all of your British friends can join us, your England.
And indeed, hopefully they will. And look forward to the next time because we've only just started.
And me too. And so, Wendy and everybody, live long and prosper. We'll see you next week. And we are now off air. So we are here still in the chat room, Wendy.
Yeah.
And so we can do our goodbyes and all of that here. But there you go. Only glitch is that we didn't have our intro and exit.
That's okay. It's quite nice we've had so many people join us. And also, I just wanted to answer Barbara, who says, I didn't know that much about British history. Thank you. Well, thank you for being interested, because I mean, there was so many places we could talk about, but I wanted to talk about Hampton Court today because we brought it up on your show on Sunday.
Yes.
And I know the Tower of London would be the next one that I probably would look at, because obviously if people want to come over and visit the UK, they might want to be interested. It's the place to go and visit, isn't it? But
yes.
Holbein, you know, I see Dave has written that is one of his favorite artists. He was wonderful. And that poor man, his patience must have been pushed by Henry VIII.
Yeah. And of course, Dave also said The Tudors was one of the most awful productions of the period of Henry VIII ever.
Loved it.
Yeah. I liked certain portions of it. You can love the show and hate the history. It's like, even when they did, I thought, a really good motion picture, Elizabeth with Kate.
She did a great job.
She did fantastic. And then they came back and did almost 10 years later or 15 years later, they did Elizabeth the Golden Age with her. That was fabulous. But of course, they still screwed with the history. They condensed too much history into one small 2-hour period. And of course, they have to do that to a certain extent. I get it. So, well, Wendy, I got to get out of here. On my end of the pond, my shore.
As always.
I've got a family to feed.
Yes.
And we're going to go have dinner. And on your end, it's late night. Although you're a night owl, I might see you a little bit later. And I'm going to tell everybody, if you want to come over to the Intrepid radio program, that starts at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, which is 10 p.m. Eastern Time, which is 3 a.m. Great Britain time.
And so the new Facebook page as well of Robertson.
There you go. And wait, what was it? Did I miss that? I thought you may have said something different, and I might have misunderstood you.
We just done the new page of Robertson.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
You need to exploit it.
Yes, we've got to. Yes, let's exploit. And we've got the Robertson page over on Facebook. Just look up Roberts N. Robertson.
You'll find us.
And you'll find us there. We should maybe change it like Roberts and Robertson, but the play on words is Robertson. I do too.
Thank you, Matthew.
So go over and join that page. We'll send out some invites to those of you who are regular listeners. And we appreciate your coming and joining us today.
Yes. Until next week.
Next Tuesday, same time. We'll see you then. So everybody, you have a nice night. And next time we'll have some music and cool pictures at the end. So live long and prosper, and we'll talk to you soon.